I have to read this from here because it's one of my favorite things that you said in the book, obviously, because I'm in the midst of a divorce right now, which is tough. And you wrote about having to release what you thought a family was after getting divorced. And I'm going through that now. So, I mean, I guess two questions. It's like, what is it about, especially young girls, because I remember reading the fairy tale thing, you know, we all think it's gonna happen one way, and then reality sets in, and it's hard. Like, working at a marriage is very hard. And when you do experience divorce, because I know you have, and I am currently, I think because I'm in the middle of it, I can't even imagine doing it again. I can't imagine being married again. And one of my favorite things in your book was it took 5 times. For him to, and I don't mean that in a funny way. I read that not as in like you were making him kind of chase you. I read that as in like, look, she knew that it was a big decision, especially a blended family. I walked into that as well with my marriage, and it's a hard thing to do when you walk into that. And I don't know, I love that by the time you said yes, he knew you meant it. Like, right. Yeah, and I mean, how did you rework? Because I know a lot of women out there that are, and men that are divorced and maybe cannot imagine setting themselves up for that again, you know?
You know, it took me a long time. It took me at least a year to get on my feet again. I think it was, I didn't know anybody that had been divorced. I felt like it was a failure on my part. I kept thinking, you know, I lost my self-esteem because I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why couldn't I make this work? And
there's so much shame and guilt involved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then just unexpectedly, I met Joe, and I had met him once before, but it was kind of a blind date when he called me. And then, but you know, I want to tell you, Kelly, I mean, this is what I would say to you if I were your mother. Yeah. You know, my mother always said to me, things are going to look better tomorrow. And if you can take one day at a time, and things will get better. And, you know, I look back on it now and I think, you know, if I hadn't gotten divorced, I never would have met Joe. I wouldn't have the beautiful family I have now. Yeah. So I really think things happen for the best. And I think, Kelly, over time, I don't know how long it's been for you, but I think over time you heal. And you're gonna be surprised, and I can't wait until that day comes for you. And you're going to call me up and you're going to say, hey, Jill, you were right. Yeah, I was just kidding. Yeah. Well, it's just an amazing thing. I love reading that, though, because it was like I think most women feel pressure to say yes. And then you feel like you don't love them if you say no. I don't know. I just found that an amazing thing that you took your time and were like, let's make sure, especially because kids were involved, and especially from the situation that they were involved. Oh, I love those boys so much, and I tell Joe that was the reason I married him, because I fell in love with the boys. Yeah, that's so awesome. But I want to talk about this too, because I know that you said cancer research is really important to you. We talked about that a minute ago, and you've talked about it quite a bit. And it's obviously a very personal thing for you. It's a personal thing for all of us. Like you said, all of us are touched by cancer, unfortunately. But I found it interesting that you were very honest about losing faith, because I've lost people, and I know other people lost people, and especially if I go into like a children's hospital and you see these young little kids and you're like, I don't understand this. Like, I can't wrap my head around why this is happening. And it's hard for people to not lose faith. Like, you know, the people generally do. So do you still have a very strong faith? Have you worked, you know, through that, or did you have friends that helped you do that? Well, I don't know whether your audience knows, but we lost our son, Bo, to cancer. He was 46 years old. And I prayed so hard every single day that he was going to live. And I felt like he was such a special person that God would let him live. And I just prayed and prayed, and then it just wasn't meant to be. And when we lost Bo, it was hard for me to keep my faith, because I had believed so strongly in prayer and that he was, you know, he'd make it. And it took me a long time, Kelly. And we were in a church just like a year ago, and Bo's been gone, gosh, almost 6 years. And a woman came up to me in the church, and she said, Jill, I want to be your prayer partner. And I said, prayer partner? I had never even heard of a prayer partner. I'm from the South, I have. So, yeah. And it was in the South. Yeah. And so
she started to call me, and we would pray together. And to this day, I mean, she calls me maybe twice a week. We email, we text one another, and it really helped me find my faith again. It was like God was saying to me, okay, Jill, you've had time, come back. And so I felt that that was a gift that she gave to me.
Yeah, and what a beautiful way to actually be able to find your way back. I know a lot of people still struggle with that.